So you can see some of the modifications I made to the Ridgerunner. I've got these 3D printed rims with inner paddles, and the deal with the inner paddles are they encompass the portals, so the portals don't drag anymore. And that makes a huge difference in snow. You can see the external design to these. These are SCX6 7-inch tall tires, so you have a huge amount of ground clearance with these. In the back, I popped off some of those vent covers, and that allows more snow and air to blow in to the motors to keep them cool, because we are always running on 3S with this machine, which overdrives the motors quite a lot. There's also a hole on the top there, and you can see through the motor, and that allows more heat to come out of the motor so it doesn't get hot in that encapsulated plastic enclosure. In my opinion, if Redcat slash Danchee had put fans inside these motors, that would have made a huge difference. There is no blades inside of them, so cooling's not exactly ideal. This rear motor does get very hot. It gets a little less hot now that I've opened it up more for airflow. But when you're running 3S and these giant tires, you can expect to get quite a lot of heat in that rear motor. The rear motor, of course, more because the rear is always going to have a little bit more traction and thus be under more load. You can also see these custom bumpers that I designed and 3D printed up. They look kind of cool and make the truck a little bit more aggressive than with the factory body alone. I almost forgot one of the biggest things going on here, which are these custom control arms that are 3D printed and are super stout. I went through a bunch of different versions and torture tested them until I came up with one that didn't break. And the reason they are bent like that is so that when the tires, these huge tires, when they go in, they don't hit the links anymore. So I got only two hands, so I can't move this tire while holding the RC and the camera. But you can imagine when that tire turns in, it would hit the links with the factory links otherwise, but now it does not. It clears them. So I know the Ridgerunner was not intended as a basher. However, in this configuration with 3S, these big 7-inch tall tires, it runs really well as a mega truck or a monster truck. It is worth noting that this truck is never going to be run in mud. It's sort of like the Clodbuster in that when you have motor on axle, you just can't afford to be dunking those motors and the drivetrain into mud. So this is going to be primarily a snow and rock truck and general trail truck. You can kind of see in this video, actually some context for this video, it was negative 11 degrees and I was driving the RC truck in the backyard from inside my nice warm house. So it was nice not having to worry about how incredibly cold it was outside while enjoying this thing driving around in the thick, deep snow. But as I was saying, you could kind of see in this video how the truck, if I could make one criticism to the design of the Ridgerunner, is that the 380 series motors are a little underwhelming. Now, obviously, I'm using this truck in a way that it was not intended to be, right? And these tires are far exceeding the size of what the drivetrain was designed to run. But I feel like it could, with a little modification from the factory, have been a bit stronger. So, as you can see right here, an open Ridgerunner transmission slash axle assembly. This is also the same axle assembly you would find in the Danchee Rockridge. It was pretty smart how they designed it. The goal must have been to create a drivetrain that has no hang up greater than the diameter of the motor, because the diameter of the motor actually ends up being the same size as the largest gear in the drivetrain. So you don't have any bulge that hangs down like a differential, which gives a lot of ground clearance for driving over rocks. However, you can also see that there is a little bit more space from the top of where the motor would slide in to where the end of the axle is. And I'm wondering if they could have fit a 390 series motor. A 390 series motor has a longer armature and would have allowed more torque and duty cycle. And while you don't really run into this RC running out of power with the factory size tires, as soon as you upgrade the tire size, you will start stalling the rear axle. And that's even on 11.1 volts 3S. And it's especially noticeable when I'm running these big, huge 7-inch tall tires. The rear axle just simply stalls out a lot sooner than the front axle. Now, that's something you'd even see back with the Clodbuster. Now, luckily, the Ridgerunner has portals in it. Here is a picture of my truck, I took the portal off, and you can see that there is a 14-tooth pinion and an 18-tooth spur output gear. That gives us a 1.285 to 1 ratio. So that pretty much means we have a 28% gear reduction. So if we divide 7 inches for the large tires I have on here by 1.285, we end up with 5.44. So for all intents and purposes, the motors, the 380 series motors, assuming they're the exact same turn and the exact same ones that come with the Rock Ridge, those motors think there are 5.44 inch tall tires on this truck, not 7 inch tall tires. So we have enough torque to turn these 7 inch tall tires as if they're 5.44s. Otherwise, if you try to put a 7 inch tall tire on a non-portaled, non-gear reduced Rock Ridge, you would definitely have major motor meltdowns on 3S. Now, if you put a 5.44 inch tall tire on a factory stock Danchee Ridgerunner, since those have no portals, then you'd be fine. It would run the same as if this had 7 inches. Now, it's worth noting, of course, with gear reduction, that doesn't make the motors consume less power. It just puts them under less load, and they just have to spin at a higher RPM to maintain the wheel speed that you would expect. If this truck had more gear reduction, then you could have gotten away with an even bigger tire. Also, let's back up for a moment. You may be wondering why I'm running on 3S. I was very underwhelmed with this truck on 2S. It's very slow. It's the same kind of speed you get out of a factory Redcat Everest 10, like just barely walking pace. Like you could effortlessly outwalk this. And I'm sure that's probably really good for crawling. Again, this is a crawling RC. It's got a rare dig and stuff, things I'll never make use of because I'm more into building big overkill trucks. I'm here putting big tires on it because I figured it could handle it with the portals. And it does. And the 3S gets it up to a speed that, as you can see in this video, it's perfectly acceptable. Like I said, it's similar to a factory clodbuster. We'll be seeing more of that in a later video when I actually compare the two side by side. So to conclude this endless monologue I've been conducting, I would rate the Ridgerunner as a strong contender to compete with the kind of fun you get out of a clodbuster. That will become more evident in a later video, which I have not made yet, so I'm predicting they'll be comparable. I'm not actually sure yet. Otherwise, reliability with this RC has been good. I've broken nothing that was factory. The rear motor does seem a little weaker as I've gotten it up to some pretty high temps in the past, but I think I've alleviated that with the cooling holes I've drilled. Speaking of parts that I am impressed with, the speed controller has held up like a champ. It is clearly not designed for 3S, and it has to simultaneously handle the duty of steering both the front and rear servos, which is something you don't see me do very much in these videos, as front wheel steer is perfectly fine. But if this ESC did not handle the amperage, I would have been out of luck because there's not a lot of different options to replace it with.